So, philosophical thoughts of education. So, before we proceed, let's define first what is philosophy. So, philosophy is defined as the study of fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. The study of philosophy as the part of education is to study how people best learn the foundations of thoughts in our society and societies that came before us. By learning how previous people and societies thought, we see how our world, societies, norms, and structure came to be. So, as an educator, understanding philosophy is really important in order for us to become an effective teacher and also for us to develop the best learning strategy that would suit our students. So, John Locke, 1632 to 1704, the emperor's educator. He believed that Locke believed that children are born with blank slate, that all knowledge came from experience. So, next would be he argued that education should be based on the inductive method, which involves learning by doing and by interacting with the environment. Locke also believed Locke also questioned the traditional view that knowledge came exclusively from literary sources, and he argued that people should be educated to govern themselves intelligently and responsibly. Locke opposed the divine rights of kings theory, which held that the monarch had the right to be an unquestioned and absolute ruler over his subjects. Political order should be based upon contract between people and the government. Aristocrats are not destined by birth to be rulers, so people were to establish their own government and select their own political leaders from among themselves. The civic education is necessary. So, in summary, John Locke believed in the importance of acquiring knowledge through sensory experience and interacting with the environment. He emphasized that he emphasized the role of education in fostering responsible governance and challenged the traditional view that knowledge only came from literary sources. So, let's define what is impressed educator. An impressed educator places significant value on first-hand experiences and direct observation as the basis for learning. They believe that knowledge is derived from sensory perception and reflection upon those perceptions. Instead of relying on innate or preconceived ideas, an impressed educator focuses on providing students with opportunities to engage with the world through their senses, experiment, and draw conclusions based on their observation. So that's all for Locke, the impressed educator. Next would be Herbert Spencer from 1820 to 1903, the utilitarian education. So Spencer's concept of survival of the fittest means that human development had gone through an evolution series of stages from the simple to the complex. So Spencer believed that education should be based on the principle of utility, means that it should be designed to help people survive and thrive in the real world. Spencer was not inclined to rote learning, and he believed that schooling should be related to life and to activities that need to earn living. So, rote learning is a memorization of technique based on repetition. So, key points on Herbert Spencer. So, scientific education. Spencer believed that science was the most important subject in the curriculum and that it should be taught from a practical perspective. Next would be the adaptation to the environment. Spencer believed that education should help people adapt to their environment and that the curriculum should be designed to reflect the needs of the modern world. And lastly would be the individual competition. Spencer believed that individual competition was essential for social progress and that education should be designed to help people compete effectively. So, let's move to the summary. Herbert Spencer emphasized the concept of survival of the fittest and the evolution progress of societies. He advocated for vocational and practical education to meet the needs of industrialized societies. So, Spencer prioritized subjects that aided in mastering the environment and believed in the value of individual competition for social progress. So, that would be all for Herbert Spencer. So, what is utilitarian education anyway? So, utilitarian education is an educational philosophy that focuses on the practical benefits of education. The goal of utilitarian education is to prepare students for practical challenges of life, such as finding a job, being a productive citizen, and contributing to society. So let's move to the specialized education versus general education. Characteristics: specialized education, general education. So let's start first with the focus. In specialized education, a particular subject or field of study. So in general education, a broad range of subjects and skills. So characteristic: purpose. In specialized education is to prepare students for a specific career. In general education, to provide students with a foundation of knowledge and skills. Next characteristic would be the advantages. So in specialized education, provide students with specialized knowledge and skills. So in general education, provide students with a broad range of knowledge and skills. In last characteristic would be the disadvantage. Specialized education can be too narrow and limiting. So in general education can be too broad and unfocused. So that would be all. Next would be John Dewey. 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 1859 to 1952. So learning through experience. Dewey believed that education should be social process, and that the school should be a miniature society in which children can learn to participate in democratic life. So democracy is a way of governing which depends on the will of the people. So he also believed that education should be based on experience and children should be encouraged to solve problems and think critically. Key points. Education is a social process. Dewey believed that education is not just about acquiring knowledge but also about learning to participate in society. Next would be the education is based on experience. Dewey believed that children learn best by doing and that they should be encouraged to solve problems and think critically. Next is the school is a miniature society. Dewey believed that the school should be a miniature society in which children can learn to participate in democratic life. Next, the teacher is a facilitator. Dewey believed that teacher's role is to facilitate learning, not to lecture or tell students what to think. And lastly, education is a lifelong. Dewey believed that education is a lifelong and that people should continue to learn throughout their lives. So summary. Dewey saw education as a social process that aimed to integrate children into society. He emphasized experiential learning, problem solving, and the development of democratic values. Dewey viewed schools as social laboratories and advocate for a curriculum that focused on personal and social growth of individuals. So that's all. Next would be George Count from 1889 to 1974, building a new social order. So Kant believed that education is not based on eternal truth, but is relative to particular society living at an given time and place. So he also argued that schools should be cope with social change that arises from technology, and that they should become instrument for social improvement rather than an agency for preserving the status quo. Key points. Number 1. Education for social change. Kant believed that education should be used to create more just and equitable society. Next would be teachers as an agent of change. Kant believed that teachers should be agent of change and that they should lead society rather than follow it. And last would be the education for social justice. Kant believed that school ought to provide an education that afford equal learning opportunities to all students. So, lag between material process and ethical values. One would be the moral problem that plague humankind. Kant identifies a number of moral problems that have plagued humankind for centuries, such as war, poverty, and inequality. He argues that these problems are not going to be solved by material progress alone. We need to also address the underlying moral issue that contribute to these problems. And last would be the role of education. Kant believed that education can play a role in helping to close the gap between material progress and ethical values. He argued that education can help people to develop the moral values that are necessary to create more just and equitable society. Next is Theodore Brameld from 1904 to 1987. Social Reconstructionism. So, social reconstructionism is a philosophy of education that emphasizes the reformation of society. The goal of social reconstructionist education. So, social reconstructionist education is designed to awaken students' consciousness about social problem and to engage them actively in problem solving. So, next is equity and equality. Social reconstructionists are firmly committed to equality and equity in both social and education. Barrier of socio-economic class and racial discrimination should be eradicated. Next is an interdependent world. So, social reconstructionists emphasize that the idea of an interdependent world. So, the quality of life needs to be considered and enhanced on a global basis. Lastly would be the implication for education. So the implication of social reconstructionist philosophy for education are significant. Social reconstructionists believe that education should be used to create a more just and equitable society. They argue that schools should critically examine present culture and resolve inconsistencies, controversies, and conflict to build a new society. They also believe that education should be international in scope and that it should emphasize equity and equality. So, summary. Bramwell's philosophy of social reconstructionism emphasized the need to align cultural values with technological advancement. He believed that education should critically examine present culture and resolve conflicts to build a new society. Bramwell advocates for an international scope in education and eradication of socio-economic racial barriers. Last is Paulo Freire, 1921 to 1997. Critical pedagogy. Critical pedagogy is a philosophy of education that emphasizes the importance of critical thinking and social justice. The banking method. Freire criticized the traditional banking method of education in which the teacher is seen as the sole possessor of knowledge and the students are seen as an empty receptacles. Problem-posing education. Freire advocates for a problem-posing approach to education in which students are encouraged to question the world around them and to develop their own critical consciousness. Dialogue. Freire believed that dialogue is essential for critical pedagogy. He argued that Dialogue is the only way to create truly democratic and egat egalitarian learning environment. So last is the implication for education. The implication of Freire's philosophy for education are significant. Freire believed that education should be used to empower students and to help them to understand the world around them. He argued that schools should be places where students can learn to question authority and to think critically about the social and political structures that shape their lives. Summary. Paulo Freire. Freire's critical pedagogy focused on overcoming oppression and creating social changes. He emphasized dialogue, critical consciousness, and the rejection of the banking method of education. Freire viewed education as a vehicle for social transformation and the development of awareness to resist and overcome domination. So that's all. Thank you.